It's been 5 years. Sometimes I still look around and can't believe this is the same house. Back then, it was someone else's property, a building I used to feel small in, uncertain, buried under late rent notices and the weight of choices I wasn't ready to make. Now, it's mine. Well, technically ours, I guess. My husband and I bought the building after his business finally took off. He's barely around these days, always flying between cities, managing deals I can't keep up with. I used to care. I used to keep track. Now I don't even ask. I run the place. I screen the tenants, collect the rent, fix what needs fixing. In a way, it keeps me grounded, and maybe it reminds me of a version of myself I've tried to forget. But lately, there's been one tenant I can't stop thinking about. His name is Devin, early 30s, tall, confident, that quiet kind of handsome that sneaks up on you. He moved in about 6 months ago. Always polite, always charming. A little too charming if I'm being honest. But lately, he's been slipping. 2 months behind on rent now, and the excuses are starting to repeat themselves. Work's been slow, his paycheck's late, something about his car breaking down. I've heard it all before. I know how this goes. And that's the thing. I do know how this goes, because once upon a time, I was him. It happened today, actually. He came to my door, all soft eyes and nervous energy. I could already tell what he was going to say before he even opened his mouth. "I know I'm behind," he said, scratching at the back of his neck like a teenager about to get scolded, "but I swear I'm good for it. I just need a little more time." I didn't say anything at first. I just let him talk, watching him the way my old landlord once watched me, measured, patient, a little too quiet. I could see the way his eyes kept darting around the room. He noticed the hardwood floors, the art on the walls, the subtle scent of something expensive and floral hanging in the air. This wasn't just an apartment anymore. It was a message. "You know," I finally said, folding my arms and leaning back against the edge of the kitchen counter, "when I was in your shoes, someone once gave me an option." He raised an eyebrow, not quite catching on. "What kind of option?" I took a slow step toward him, letting the silence do most of the talking. "An arrangement," I said quietly. He blinked. "Like, I'm sure you can figure it out," I replied, tilting my head just enough to let the implication land. "I've been where you are. I know what desperation feels like, and I know what it means to take a chance when there's no other way out." The words hung in the air like smoke, and for a split second, neither of us moved. Then he gave a nervous laugh, like he wasn't sure if I was joking. I didn't laugh back. "I'm not saying you have to," I added quickly, softening my tone. "But I'm also not offering this to just anyone." He stared at me for a long time, his mouth half open like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. "I'll give you until the end of the week," I said, brushing past him toward the door. "But after that, I'll need a decision. Either way." I felt his eyes on my back as I walked out, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something flicker beneath the surface, dangerous, familiar, and maybe just a little bit thrilling. And just like that, I was back where it all began. But this time, I wasn't the one behind on rent. For the next couple of days, Devin avoided me. It wasn't obvious, not at first. He still sent the usual text responses to my polite check-ins, still nodded and gave a casual, "Hey," when we passed in the hallway. But something in his eyes had changed, like he was suddenly aware of something he wasn't supposed to notice, and it made him uneasy. I'd catch glimpses of him from the window sometimes, sitting on the porch in that faded gray hoodie, smoking, thinking, always thinking. I should have felt bad, maybe. I don't know. A part of me wondered if I'd crossed a line, but another part, the part I hadn't let breathe in a long time, felt something else entirely. Power. Because for once, I wasn't the one asking, I wasn't the one afraid, and I knew that look in his eyes, the hesitation, the wrestling. That's what made it worse. Or maybe better. He was considering it. It all came to a head Friday night. The building was quiet, everyone else either out or tucked into their weekend routines. The air was heavy, like it was holding its breath. I was halfway through folding laundry when I heard a knock on the door. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Devin stood there with his hands in his pockets, eyes low, jaw tight like he was holding something in. "You said I had until the end of the week." I nodded once. "It's the end of the week." He didn't smile, didn't flinch, just looked past me into the apartment like he was trying to figure out if walking inside would change everything. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let him. He moved slowly, careful, like he didn't trust the floor beneath him. I closed the door gently behind us, the soft click of the lock sounding louder than it should have. For a moment, we just stood there, silence stretching out like it was daring one of us to break it. "I've been thinking," he finally said, running a hand over his buzzed hair, "about what you said." I stayed quiet. I wanted him to say it. I wanted to hear the words. "I've never done anything like that," he admitted, still not looking at me. "But I'm not stupid either. I know what happens when rent keeps stacking up. I've already got one eviction on my record. If I get another—" His voice trailed off. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "I just don't want you to think I'm some kind of—" He struggled. "You know, some guy who takes advantage." I almost laughed. The irony was suffocating. "Devin," I said, stepping a little closer, "you're not taking advantage of anything. I offered it, just like it was once offered to me." He looked up at that. "So it actually happened? Back then?" I nodded, slowly. "Almost." He raised an eyebrow. "Almost?" "Yeah," I said, the word tasting strange coming out of my mouth. "Almost." We were quiet again. And in that stillness, something shifted. I could feel it, thick and electric, crawling across the space between us like a live wire. Then he said something I didn't expect. "What if we don't do anything?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "What if I just stay?" he said, eyes locking onto mine for the first time. "What if you let me stay? No strings attached. Just trust me to make it right eventually. No favors, no arrangements." I laughed softly, not mocking, just surprised. "That's not how the world works, Devin." "Doesn't mean we can't try," he said. And that's when I saw it, that flash of something, not just charm or desperation, something deeper, something dangerous, conviction. He wasn't just playing along, he was pushing back, and it made me feel off balance. I stepped even closer, enough to smell the faint trace of sweat and cologne clinging to his hoodie. "Do you really think I'd put myself out there like that just to be turned down?" He didn't answer, but I saw his throat move as he swallowed. I reached up, brushing something off his shoulder, something that wasn't there, just to feel how tense he'd gotten. "You ever wonder why I offered you that option, Devin?" I asked quietly. He held my gaze. "Yeah, I have." I waited. "Because you saw something in me," he said, voice low. "Or maybe you saw something in yourself from back then." I didn't reply, because he was right. But then he added, "But I'm not him, and you're not her anymore either, are you?" It hit me like a slap, and I hated how much it turned me on. "You should go," I said, suddenly stepping back. He didn't move. "You sure?" he asked, voice steady. I didn't answer. He turned and walked toward the door, but paused with his hand on the knob. "I'm not going to beg to stay," he said without turning around. "But I know what this is, what you're doing, and if you're going to play that game, just know I know how to play it too." And then he left, just like that. But he left the door cracked, and I couldn't help but stare at it, wondering if this was just beginning, or if I'd just started something I couldn't finish. And the scariest part, I wasn't even sure what side I was on anymore. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Devin, standing in that doorway, his back to me, voice low and calm like he knew exactly what he was doing, like he'd walked away not because he was done, but because he wanted me to chase. And I hated how right he was. I wasn't her anymore. That struggling, quiet woman from 5 years ago, the one who begged for mercy behind closed doors and pretended she still had dignity left. She was gone. Now, I was the one holding the keys, the one calling the shots, and yet, somehow, he had me on my heels. By morning, I was pacing the kitchen, phone in hand, scrolling to his contact, staring at it like it held a secret I wasn't ready to hear. I didn't text, didn't call. I just waited for him to knock again, for him to show up and say he'd changed his mind. But he didn't. 2 days went by, then 3, still nothing. But I knew he hadn't left. I could hear him sometimes upstairs, the thump of footsteps or a door creaking open. I even heard his music once, faintly, like he wanted me to know he was still around, still breathing in the space I gave him. Then came Wednesday night. I was pulling into the driveway when I saw his bedroom window open, the curtain fluttering like a whisper. And there he was, standing at the edge, bare chest catching the last bit of light, phone pressed to his ear, laughing softly, not at me, not with me, just living, like nothing had happened. And that got to me. I climbed the stairs to his unit faster than I intended. I didn't even knock. I just stood outside the door, hand hovering, listening. I could hear the quiet hum of conversation inside, maybe a TV, maybe someone on speaker. I couldn't tell, but I heard his voice, low, amused, casual. I finally knocked. A pause, then the sound of footsteps. The door cracked, and there he was, shirtless, sweaty, holding a towel and clearly caught off guard. "Hey," he said, cool as ever. "Didn't expect you." "Yeah, well, guess I'm full of surprises." He opened the door a little wider, but didn't step aside. "Everything okay?" "You've been avoiding me." "I've been giving you space," he said simply. "Figured that's what you wanted." "No," I replied. "You figured you wanted it, so you took it." He raised an eyebrow. "You mad about that?" I didn't answer. Instead, I pushed the door gently. He didn't resist. I stepped inside. His place was warm, lived in, a little messy, but not dirty. The smell of his cologne hung in the air, mixed with sweat and something spicier from the kitchen. My eyes swept the room without thinking, like I was trying to memorize the details. He stood behind me, watching. "You came all the way up here to fight?" he asked after a second. "No." I turned to face him. "I came to remind you what kind of deal you're playing with." He smirked. "Funny, I thought I was the one reminding you." Something snapped then. Not anger, not lust. Something heavier. The kind of tension that doesn't explode, it smolders. Quiet. Dangerous. "You think this is a game?" I asked, stepping closer. "No," he said. "I think it used to be. Until you started wondering what would happen if I didn't play along." The air between us felt hotter than it should have. I could see it in his face. He wasn't bluffing. He knew exactly what this was, what we were, and he wasn't scared anymore. 5 years ago, I said, voice low, someone offered me a deal like this, and I nearly took it. You know why I didn't? Because you still had lines back then, he said. I nodded. And now? He stepped in, close enough that I could feel his breath. Now you're testing mine. For a second, we just stood there, inches apart, breathing the same air, wanting the same thing maybe, or maybe just trying to figure out who wanted it more, and then the tension did what it always does. It found the edge and walked right up to it. He didn't touch me. Not really. Just brushed past me to grab the towel from the couch. But even that movement, that heat, it lingered. He threw the towel over his shoulder, looked back at me, and said, I won't beg to stay, but I won't beg for you either. I stared at him. And what if I told you the rent's due tomorrow, final notice? He smiled. Then maybe tomorrow will be interesting. I turned and walked to the door. My heart was pounding, my hands slightly shaking, not from fear, something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Sleep tight, he called as I opened the door. But I didn't look back, because I knew something now. This wasn't just a game. This was a storm, and we were both standing in the middle of it, waiting to see who'd get hit first. It was almost 3 a.m. when I heard the knock on my door. Not loud, not urgent, just deliberate. I'd been lying there wide awake for over an hour, replaying every second of our last conversation in my head, the words he used, the pauses between them, the way he looked at me like he was daring me to blink first. When I opened the door, there he was. Devon, shirt on this time, damp at the collar like he'd been pacing or wrestling with the same storm I was. His eyes met mine, calm but serious. "Didn't mean to wake you," he said. "You didn't." For a second, neither of us moved. The silence stretched long between us like some kind of invisible thread, one neither of us wanted to cut but didn't know how to tie either. Then he asked, "Can I come in?" I didn't answer. I just stepped back and let him walk inside. He looked around the place like it was familiar but foreign now, like he was trying to see if I'd rearranged anything, hidden something, or maybe left something out on purpose. I hadn't, but his eyes still scanned everything, including me. "Couldn't sleep," he said, settling on the edge of the couch. I crossed my arms. "That why you came down here?" He looked at me and gave the smallest shrug. "That, and I figured you weren't sleeping either." "You figured right." Another silence, one that felt heavier this time, more loaded. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "What are we doing?" I didn't pretend not to know what he meant. "We're walking a line," I said. He nodded. "Yeah, but whose line is it?" That question hung in the air, because it was a good one. Mine, his, ours, or was it something neither of us controlled, just some quiet current pulling us both toward something we weren't ready to admit? I sat down across from him, watching the way he looked at the floor, at his hands, at me, like he was searching for something solid to grab onto. "You ever think about how this would look from the outside?" I asked quietly. He met my gaze. "I try not to." "Why not?" "Because I'd rather deal with the mess I see from the inside." And somehow that made sense. Too much sense. There was something disarming about Devon, not just his calm or his timing, but the way he could stand in a moment like it didn't scare him, like even the awkward, complicated parts of life didn't make him flinch. I used to think power meant control, me holding the keys, me setting the terms, but in that moment I realized something else. Real power was wanting something you shouldn't and not backing down from it. "I'm married," I said suddenly, like I was reminding us both. "So am I," he replied. "Still doesn't stop this." "What is this?" I asked, my voice quieter now. He looked at me for a long time. "Whatever you say it is." That answer, it felt like permission, and also a warning. I stood up, walked past him toward the kitchen, just to get some distance. I poured a glass of water, not because I needed it, but because I needed to do something. His presence had a way of making the air feel thick, charged. "You know," I said over my shoulder, "you could have just paid your rent like everyone else." He chuckled softly. "Would have been boring, though." I turned to face him. "So this is what? Fun for you?" He stood too, walked over to the counter, close enough that our arms almost brushed. "You tell me." I could feel the pull then, like gravity had tilted just for us, like the space between us wasn't really space anymore. "If I told you to leave right now," I whispered, "would you?" He looked me dead in the eye. "Yeah, but you won't." My heart thudded hard at that, not because he was wrong, but because he was absolutely perfectly right. He moved a fraction closer. "You want to feel in control, but what you really want is someone to take that control from you, just long enough to forget how heavy it gets." I didn't move. I couldn't, because he saw too much. He stepped behind me, just barely, his voice low in my ear. "And I could take it," he murmured, "right here, right now. You wouldn't stop me, but you'd hate yourself later, and I don't want you to hate me." I closed my eyes. Damn him. Damn him for knowing exactly where the edge was, and for choosing not to shove me over it. His hand barely grazed the small of my back as he stepped away. That single touch sent fire up my spine. "Good night, landlady," he said softly, and just like that, he left. No kiss, no touch, just words. Heavy, perfect words. And I stood in my kitchen, glass still in hand, trembling with a craving that hadn't even been fulfilled. Not yet. But the storm? It was circling again, and next time, I wasn't so sure I'd let it pass. A week passed, then 2. Devon paid nothing, said nothing, and yet I still saw him, moving around his unit, running shirtless in the mornings, washing that damn car of his like he wasn't 4 months deep in rent debt. I hated how aware of him I'd become, how the air shifted when I knew he was outside, how my breath caught when I heard his unit door creak open. He wasn't knocking anymore, but I still felt him, like heat behind a closed door. My husband had come back into town briefly, just for a weekend, some contractor issue in Miami. He smelled like hotel soap and convenience store cologne. We slept in the same bed and barely touched. When he left again, I didn't cry. I didn't miss him. I was too distracted by something or someone else. On the 3rd Friday of the month, Devon left a white envelope on the patio table just outside my kitchen window. I spotted it while washing dishes, heart stopping for a second. I went outside, picked it up, opened it. Empty. Just a blank piece of paper inside. No cash, no check, no note, just nothing. I stared at it for a long time, feeling something in me click out of place. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. It was a dare. At midnight, I knocked on his door. He answered after just one knock, like he'd been waiting. "Forgot something?" he asked, leaning in the doorway with that maddening calm of his. "You think this is a game?" I snapped, holding up the empty envelope. He didn't flinch, just gave me a slow once-over, like he was reading past the words. "I think you came down here looking for more than rent. I could evict you, Devon. Tonight." His eyes didn't move. "Then do it." I didn't speak. I didn't move. Because he knew I wouldn't. Because somewhere in this messed up mess we were tiptoeing around, I didn't want him gone. "I want it," I whispered before I could stop myself. "I want what I had 5 years ago. I want that power back." "You had it," he said, "and then you gave it away." I felt something inside me crack open. Something dark, maybe. Something real. I pushed past him and walked straight into his living room. He didn't stop me. "Tell me what you want, Mrs. Landlady," he said, behind me, voice low. I turned slowly. "You," I said. "I want you on your knees, begging to stay. I want to see you desperate, humble. I want to make you pay for every second you've made me feel like this." He walked up to me, chest just inches from mine. "Then do it," he said. "Take what you want." My hand was on his shirt, gripping the fabric. My body betrayed every word I'd spoken. My mouth hovered close to his, and then the loud knock on the door broke everything. We both froze. One knock, then another, urgent, repetitive. He turned his head toward it. "Expecting someone?" I asked, breathless. "No," he said, stepping back slowly. The knock came again, harder this time. He walked to the door and opened it, and there stood a woman. Young, fit, pretty, tired eyes, wearing leggings and a sweatshirt. She looked from Devon to me, and her eyes didn't need any time to guess what was happening. Her voice was quiet, controlled. "I'm his wife," she said, not to Devon, but to me. My stomach dropped. I looked at Devon, but his eyes were closed, jaw tight, like he knew this was coming, like he'd been dreading it but hadn't stopped it either. She looked at him then. "I told you I felt something was off. You said I was paranoid." Devon rubbed the back of his neck but didn't speak. "I followed you today," she continued. "Saw you come back here, waited to see if you'd go out again. You didn't." She turned back to me. I thought maybe I was wrong, maybe I was just being insecure. I swallowed hard, pulse racing. She stepped inside, slowly, walked right past Devon and stood in front of me, barely a foot away. And then she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "Hope you don't mind," she said, voice eerily calm. "But I recorded part of your little conversation. Not enough to get you arrested or anything." She looked at Devon. but definitely enough to send to your husband. Silence. I tried to breathe, but I couldn't. Everything in the room was closing in. She held the phone up, thumb hovering over the screen, and then, smiling softly, she asked, "So, what are you willing to do to keep me from sending it?" And right there, right in that moment, I realized something horrifying. I wasn't the only one who remembered the game from 5 years ago. I wasn't the only one willing to twist the rules, only this time, I wasn't holding the power anymore. Click on the subscribe button on the screen to subscribe to Inquisco for more real and true stories like this.